British English is full of expressions that sound completely bizarre, but what if we could see them in action? You might have heard someone say, "It's raining cats and dogs," or state that something is a piece of cake. But have you ever stopped to wonder where these expressions come from? And what do they actually mean? Well, the best way to learn new vocabulary is through context. Ideally, a story. When you see idioms used in real-life situations, you start to get a feel for them. However, here's the thing. Hearing them and understanding them is one thing, but visualizing them really helps them to stick. That's why today we're going to use Filmora's AI voice-to-video feature to bring this story to life. Filmora is a powerful tool that automatically transfers your audio, syncing visuals with the tone and meaning of the story. The AI takes your audio and adds images that match what's being said, which helps bring the idioms to life in a way that's both fun and memorable. You'll be able to see each idiom in action, making it easier to remember and use them yourself. This is the perfect way to understand how idioms work in real conversations. Hearing them, seeing them, and experiencing them. So, let's dive into the story, and as we go, watch how the idioms unfold and come to life on screen. Are you ready? Let's go. Part 1, a roller coaster day. Chris opened his eyes with a groan, immediately feeling like the world was against him. His alarm had been blaring for the past 10 minutes, but his body was refusing to wake up. His head pounded, his throat burned, and every muscle in his body ached as if he had run a marathon overnight. "I'm definitely feeling under the weather," Chris muttered to himself, staring at the ceiling. Feeling under the weather is an idiom that means to feel ill or unwell. It's often used to describe minor illnesses like a cold or flu. Some examples could be, "I'm feeling a bit under the weather today, so I'm gonna stay home." Or, "She's been under the weather all week, so she missed work." Chris knew he had to get up. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day of his job interview, the one he'd been working towards for months. And later, there was a date he had been looking forward to. But right now, the thought of facing either of those things felt like an impossible challenge. Tom, his roommate, poked his head into the room. "You good, mate?" he asked, the tone full of concern. Chris sighed deeply. "I feel awful, but I can't skip today." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Bad timing, huh?" Bad timing was an understatement. Not only did Chris feel terrible, but he had a lot riding on this day. With a quiet groan, he dragged himself out of bed and towards the bathroom. "I guess I'll have to bite the bullet," he muttered, already feeling the weight of the day ahead. Bite the bullet is another idiom. It means to face something difficult or unpleasant head on, even though you may not want to. It comes from historical practices when soldiers had to bite down on bullets during surgery to avoid screaming in pain. Here's an example. "I know you don't want to take the exam, but you'll just have to bite the bullet and study hard. I didn't want to go to the dentist, but I had to bite the bullet." Part 2, the lucky discovery. By the time Chris finally made it out of the flat, he was already running late for his interview. His head was spinning, his stomach was in knots, and his nerves were shot. But there was no turning back now. He had to make it. He swung by the cafe on the corner, hoping the caffeine would kick in and give him the extra boost he desperately needed. But as he approached the counter, his hands shaking slightly, he realized he'd forgotten his wallet. Wallet, no card, no cash, he thought, panic rising. The barista stared at him expectantly. "That'll be £4.50. Chris's eyes widened. £4.50? That costs an arm and a leg. He could hardly believe it. He was already late, and now he couldn't even buy a coffee to get through the morning. Cost an arm and a leg means something is very expensive, more than you would expect or want to pay. This idiom likely comes from the idea that losing an arm or a leg is a huge sacrifice, so paying a lot for something feels like a big sacrifice. Some examples are, "This new phone costs an arm and a leg. I had to pay an arm and a leg for my hotel room while traveling." The barista raised an eyebrow. "Do you want it or not?" In desperation, he fumbled through his jacket pocket, praying for something to work in his favor. To his surprise, he found an old, crumbled loyalty card. He held it up, eyes scanning the fine print. 1 free drink. "Thank God," he whispered under his breath, handing over the card. For once, things were finally going his way. Part 3, the job interview. Coffee in hand, Chris barely made it to the office in time for his interview. His nerves were rattling, and the interview panel was already seated, waiting for him. His mind was foggy, his body still heavy with fatigue. He had no choice but to push forward. His boss, who had taken part in the hiring process, greeted him coldly as he sat down. "Let's get started. We've got a lot to cover." Chris cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. The questions started pouring in, standard interview stuff, but then they began talking about his ideas for the company's upcoming advertising campaign. And that's when things really began to heat up. "We need something minimalist," his boss said. "Clean, subtle, nothing too flashy. But this is for young people. We need something bold, something that pops. It should stand out." His boss gave him a sharp look. "I disagree. We need something simple." The conversation quickly turned into a back and forth, with Chris arguing that the campaign needed to be bold and bright to resonate with the target audience, while his boss pushed back for something quieter and more refined. It felt like they would never see eye to eye, each of them convinced that their way was right. This is the next idiom, see eye to eye. It means to agree on something. However, if two people don't see eye to eye, they have different opinions or ideas. Some examples could be, "We don't see eye to eye on how the project should be done. My sister and I never see eye to eye on music, but we get along anyway." The tension in the room was palpable, and Chris was beginning to doubt he'd make it through without a total breakdown. But after a few moments of awkward silence, his boss finally sighed. "Fine, we'll find a middle ground. A compromise." Chris let out a sigh of relief. It wasn't a perfect situation, but it was enough to make him feel like he'd won something today. Part 4, the date's silver lining. After dinner, Chris walked his date to the front door of the building, feeling a sense of relief. The awkwardness at the beginning of the date had faded, and they ended up having a great conversation over dessert. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster either. "Well," she said, giving him a warm smile, "I had a great time, despite the awkward beginning." Chris chuckled. "Sorry, I was a little bit nervous." She laughed again, the sound light and genuine. "Don't worry, I was a little bit anxious too." They stood there for a moment, and Chris felt the butterflies fluttering in his stomach. There was something about her that made him feel at ease. "Well, I guess I should get going," she said, glancing at her watch. "But let's do this again sometime, yeah?" "Yeah, I'd really like that." Chris smiled, feeling a rush of hope. As she waved goodbye and turned her head inside, Chris stood there for a second, letting it all sink in. The day had started horribly, but somehow things had turned around. Maybe it wasn't the perfect day, but he had gotten through it. Chris turned and started walking home. He passed by the same cafe where he had stumbled earlier, the one where he had almost spent too much on coffee. When he got home, he pulled out his phone, seeing a message pop up from his date. "Had a great time tonight. Let's do it again?" Chris laughed, feeling a wave of happiness. He was over the moon. Not only had he survived the interview, but the date had ended better than he ever expected. Over the moon is another idiom, and it means to be extremely happy or pleased. It's often used when somebody is very excited about something positive. For instance, when she heard she got the job, she was over the moon. He was over the moon when his favorite band played his song. Chris sat down, kicked off his shoes, and leaned back on the sofa with a grin, already looking forward to the next date. And there you have it. You've learned some key idioms, seen them in action, and hopefully they've become a little bit easier to understand and remember. But here's the best part. Learning idioms doesn't have to stop here. With Filmora's AI voice-to-video feature, you can continue bringing your English learning to life in a fun and interactive way. By visualizing idioms, stories, and conversations, you can connect the words to real-life situations, helping you to retain new vocabulary and expressions more effectively. Also, if you're a content creator, you can still use the feature in your own language and make your videos pop and stand out from the crowd. So if you want to create your own videos in a nice and easy way, try Filmora today. Simply go to the link in the description below and download it for free. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, smash the like button, and I'll see you next time.